Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
Once upon a time, Adidas discontinued the F50 line and replaced it with the X. 9 years later, the exact opposite is happening. This of course begs the question, have they made the right decision, and are the new ones better than the old ones? Let's compare. Starting with the price, where the X Crazyfast Elite, formerly known as the Crazyfast 0.1, no difference between them, just a bit of a name change, retail for $260. But if your budget allows for a little bit more, and of course depending on personal preference, you also had the option of the X Crazyfast Plus, which is the thinner, ultra lightweight variation of the Elite model that bears a retail price of $300, where the F50 Elite carries on exactly where the Crazyfast Elite left off, retailing for $260. As of right now, there is no plus option in the F50 lineup. Of course, given that the Crazyfast is now a previous generation model, you will be able to find them on sale in just about every single colorway left in stock. So from a value for money perspective, if you just need a new pair of boots right now, there's great value to be had from the Crazyfast. But if you're looking to get any of these boots below the normal retail price, you can do so by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the links down below. When it comes to the uppers on offer from the Crazyfast lineup, you effectively have two different options, although they are at the end of the day fairly similar. The less expensive Elite model is a pretty straightforward kind of textile base with a fused synthetic overlay, very thin all the way through, definitely trending on more of that raw kind of plasticky synthetic feel without feeling overly crunchy or anything like that. Is it my favorite synthetic material on the market? By no means no, but if you do like that kind of raw barefoot sensation, this is fantastic. And it also has a nice amount of structure where from a lockdown standpoint, your feet feel very secure inside of the boots with the laces tied tight, where the Crazyfast Plus is the same thing, but just thinned out even more. It's definitely more pliable, it's definitely thinner, and definitely more raw. However, you do lose out on some structure, which I think does have its benefits in terms of overall comfort, in that I do find the Plus model a little bit more comfortable than the Elite. Also, given the fact that this does have that kind of more traditional U-throat construction, which does relate it a little bit more closely to something like the brand new F50. But long story short, thinner, less structure, slightly thicker, more structure, but both really good if you're looking for that raw barefoot feel from what is ultimately kind of like a thin synthetic material. Where the Fiber Touch upper of the new F50 Elite definitely trends more towards the knitted side of things, in that it's still a very thin material, giving you that barefoot feel, but it has more softness to it. It's a little bit more sock-like in some way, and in general, doesn't feel quite as thin. It does have the necessary structure that you would want. I would say a little bit more than the Crazyfast Plus, but maybe a little bit less than the Crazyfast Elite. And of course, you do have what appears to be a traditional U-throat construction, but you actually have this kind of internal sock system made from this thin microfiber, giving you a little bit of a unique fit and feel compared to just about every speed boot on the market. Also worth noting is the actual micro texturing on the surface that you see here highlighted in white. It's very significant, it's very rough to the touch, and it does actually provide some extra grip on the ball that you simply will not get with either variations of the outgoing Crazyfast. So in general, it's a little bit softer, it's a little bit more sock-like, it definitely has some extra thickness to it, and it's definitely more grippy on the ball than what you'll find from the Crazyfast. For me, that would be something that I personally prefer. However, your taste, of course, will determine which one will be best for you, because I really don't think any one of these three can be called the best, in that they're all very good, but of course have their differences. When it comes to sole plates and stud patterns, these two boots have gone in fairly different directions, where with the Crazyfast, of course, the story was that kind of plastic plate that's inserted into the sole plate predominantly through the forefoot and midfoot area. It used to be carbon on earlier generations of the X series. However, it's been replaced, but ultimately gives you that kind of snapback sensation. It's more stiff and firm as your foot bends to give you that spring back sensation. Does this actually translate to any performance gains? Not necessarily, but from a feel perspective, it gives you that kind of underfoot bounciness that I think a lot of people have really enjoyed from the X series for quite some time now, where if you look at the Sprint Frame 360 construction of the new F50, it obviously draws a lot of inspiration from that OG F50 Adizero from 2010, where it is ultimately a much more simple plastic sole plate with much more flexibility through the forefoot. You no longer have that insert in the sole plate itself, which makes this feel way more flexible and just way less responsive. It's arguably more on the traditional side in terms of its underfoot feel versus the slightly stiffer, more responsive feel that you're definitely getting from the Crazyfast, whether it's the Plus or the Elite model. And then when it comes to the FG stud patterns on offer, it is basically the exact same layout, but you can see that on the new F50, they've definitely opted for some more kind of rounded style conical studs versus blades pretty much all the way through on the Crazyfast. The difference is that the Crazyfast definitely gives you a little bit more bite when pushing off, where the F50 kind of prioritizes a more well-rounded movement pattern in terms of still giving you that freedom to twist and pivot with maybe not quite as aggressive a bite when digging into the ground. But overall, I think both of these stud patterns perform the part. Definitely though, if you want more of a speed boot kind of tech focused direction on a sole plate and stud pattern design, I'd give the edge to the Crazyfast. And then there's the weight, where I think the Crazyfast in general really introduced that ultra lightweight feel back into the Adidas speed category, but this is an F50. The Adizero from 2010, and really every F50 Adizero was known for being so much lighter than everything else. Is that actually the case? Which of these three is the lightest and which of these three is the heaviest? Let's use a scale and find out. All in the same size, 9.5 US, starting with the heaviest of the bunch, the Crazyfast Elite. They weigh in at 6.9 ounces, the equivalent of 196 grams, which is still by no means a heavy pair of football boots. Then we have the F50 Elite. They weigh in a little bit less, 6.6 ounces, the equivalent of 188 grams, which is definitely noticeable, but not hugely significant, I would say. And then finally, the lightest of the bunch by a significant margin, the Crazyfast Plus weigh in at 5.95 ounces, the equivalent of 169 grams. Truly the lightest thing that we've had since that 2010 F50. In other words, the new F50 is light, but it isn't necessarily weightless in feel like the Crazyfast Plus. When it comes to fit and feel on feet, when you're comparing new to old, these are the two models where you're going to notice the biggest change, where I think the Crazyfast Elite definitely has more of that kind of firmer, thin, less soft, kind of plasticky synthetic feel to the upper with more structure overall, where the F50 Elite is definitely along the lines of a knitted boot in terms of its kind of pliability, the way it moves with your foot, and just generally being slightly more padded and obviously just a little bit thicker. For me, I find it the more comfortable boot. It's certainly my preference in terms of feel on feet, but at the same time, for those that like a little bit more of that kind of raw, rigid speed boot feel, you might actually prefer the Crazyfast Elite over the new F50. Also, the feel of the sole plate underfoot, very different. Much more flat and traditional, normal, dare I say, with the new F50, where you kind of have a little bit of that raised toe slash forefoot in the Crazyfast, and just generally a stiffer, kind of more performance-oriented feel underfoot. Not to say that it actually translates into actual performance. I don't think you're going to be faster in the Crazyfast versus the F50, but it is definitely a feel that I think some people might have a strong preference for over what they've done in a more traditional way with this new F50. From a width and shaping perspective, they changed quite a bit, where I definitely think the new F50 is a little bit lower in volume all the way through, and also a little bit slimmer, or at least more consistent in shape all the way through. But because of the more pliable material, I just think it wraps your foot more closely and generally is an improvement in terms of the fit, where I've always found that the Crazyfast Elite, it's snug through the midfoot, a little bit tapered kind of towards the base of the forefoot, and then gets wider again in the forefoot and toe box area, which doesn't really fit me exactly the way that I would like it to, but at the same time, a lot of people have them and a lot of people really like the way that they fit. It's more so just a difference in fit rather than something that I would say is going to 100% be better or worse when transitioning into the new F50 for everybody, because again, everyone has a slightly different shaped foot. From a width perspective though, I don't think either of these would be fantastic options for somebody with really wide feet, but if you want that snug feel, they should work for most foot types. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing both of these boots in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So regardless of which one you decide to go for, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. Where in my opinion, the much better or at least closer comparison would be between the Crazyfast Plus and the new F50 Elite. When you have them on side by side, there are certainly some similarities in regards to the overall shaping of the boot, the feel of the upper, despite the Crazyfast Plus definitely being on the thinner side compared to the F50s, they still have that super pliable sensation. The big difference I think is going to be down to the fact that the F50s just have more structure and do feel that little bit softer, which again would be my preference. I think a lot of people would agree with that, where obviously with the Crazyfast Plus, the goal was just to be as thin and light as possible. So if that's something that you're really into, then I don't necessarily see a reason to upgrade into F50. Also, given that these both have a standard U-throat construction to some degree, I do think the overall lockdown and just way that it wraps your foot, especially through the heel and ankle area, is just a little bit more snug on the F50 and ultimately more secure as well. I think that is the big trade-off. Do you want a little bit more responsiveness, or do you want a little bit more of that thin, lightweight feel? That to me is the big difference between these two. And then again, the sole plate difference, that's going to be exactly the same like I described with the Crazyfast Elite. What you have here on this Crazyfast Plus with that insert just feels a little bit more progressive and tech forward in terms of what we've been getting from speed boots over the last little while. From a width perspective, these both definitely have width to them to the point where they'll work for most people, although I definitely think the Crazyfast Plus, especially because of its more traditional U-throat construction and standalone tongue, does have more option for expansion. So it is going to be the widest fitting boot out of the three in this video, but I don't think any of them would necessarily be a great option for somebody with extremely wide feet. And then again, just like the Elites, these do run true to size. So regardless of which boot in this video you're interested in, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, is the new F50 genuinely better than the Crazyfast that it replaces? Objectively, probably not, and subjectively, maybe, depending on what you like. Focusing specifically on the Crazyfast Plus, the weight is undeniable. It's just way lighter in feel than either of these two football boots, and the sole plate and stud pattern tech featured on the Crazyfast Plus as well as the Elite definitely has more of that kind of tech-forward, progressive feel that we've come to expect from a modern-day speed boot, two elements that you aren't getting to the same extreme on this brand new F50 Elite. With that said, if the goal of Adidas in bringing back the F50 was to give us some of that F50 DNA, I think they've actually done a good job of that, in that what made those early F50 Adizero models so successful was not just how light they were, but more or less how simple they were as well. And I think from a simplicity standpoint, you can definitely look at the F50 Elite and say it's a step backwards from a tech perspective, coming from the Crazyfast and maybe even the last several generations of the Adidas X, but the experience of playing in the boots, the fit, the comfort, the touch on the ball, all of those things, in my opinion, I prefer over what they were doing with the Crazyfast. So I guess what I mean is I can't say that I think the F50 Elite is better than either the Crazyfast Elite or the Crazyfast Plus. It's more so just a little bit of a different direction for what is still a top quality pair of speed boots. In a lot of ways, especially with the upper, it kind of feels like a blending of the Plus and the Elite from the Crazyfast series, with obviously a little bit more of a flexible, dare I say, traditional setup with the sole plate and stud pattern. From a comfort perspective, I do think it's more comfortable and better fitting than these two, but at the same time, I definitely think there's plenty of people that could try all three of these boots on, especially not knowing which is the oldest and which is the newest, and come to the conclusion that they like the feel of the Crazyfast Plus or the Crazyfast Elite a little bit more than the new F50. It just depends on what you like.